Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
It's too late. We're starting. What's up, STS Nation? Fil Waters is running to get something. Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime. Phil, I thought you were leaving the dog. Is that another dog? I thought you were leaving one dog behind, the Bud Light dog.
The Bud Light dog, patent dog, target dog, depending on your generational reference.
Yes.
Had to stay behind, but we have here. Come here, Nugget.
Come on, Nugget.
This is
off to a wild start already.
This is our adopted dog.
Oh.
She adopted us. I never thought I would fall in love with a Chihuahua, but
it's kind of like having a minivan, Phil. It's the equivalent.
This is Nugget, and she has an owner, but we are her Ohana. We are her family.
She looks very embarrassed to be there. What's up, Nugget? I love all dogs.
She doesn't like to be picked up. That's all.
Oh, well, there you go. So she's mad at you. Great Scott, it's time for your True Crime Phil. A show so good, it happens live every Friday. Best guest, America's most respected detective, Fil Waters. We had to adjust the show time for him because you can see there's a new backdrop. He is in Hawaii, where he had to put in time for a nap and surfing and then a nap. So we have adjusted the time for the next few hours or next few months. We will be live at 5 p.m. Eastern time. He spent 33 years in law enforcement, 23 of those in the homicide unit, investigating more than 400 homicides. He is also a Marine and the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations and starred in the show The Interrogator. And then he's not really in Hawaii, but he has an Orlando mug in hand. Close enough. There it is. That's as good as he gets. Agent Scott Duffey is director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He is a retired FBI special agent out of Delaware, handling crime matters, including gangs, bank robberies, and fugitive task force cases. And prior to the FBI, served 5.5 years as a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania police officer. Now on to the business at hand. You can follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter. We are at Podcast STS. You can also listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can support us at Patreon, become a YouTube member. The merch store is open and people are buying it. It's kind of not an Orlando mug, but an STS mug instead. We had a very successful Patreon and YouTube member meet and greet with the great Carm yesterday. It went well. Got to meet some of you, so that's always an awesome and wonderful thing to do. And look at this, right out of the box, we have a question for Scott, not for Phil, but for Scott from Teresa in Ireland. For Scott, as a true crime reader for 40 years, especially on the psychology of serial killers, do you lend a lot of support or belief to criminal profiling? That is John Douglas, who I've heard the name. And if so, does it help in the field? Thank you.
That's a loaded question. There's a lot of different, I can go with different answers depending on. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in the FBI's behavioral science unit. They've supported me, my cases over the years. And of course, many of my local police partners in Delaware and beyond have utilized those resources. So there are good things to take away, but then there are also not. Well, let me say this: there's nothing like, and my hat off to Phil, years and years and years of experience where you're just able to take things that you have read. Obviously, we've all been in the classroom, to put those into practice and to really be able to put those pieces to work. So yes, I'm a big supporter of what they do, but at the same time, there's nothing like experience in the field to help you fine-tune those skills.
Fil Waters, are you a believer in criminal profiling? You're a little more old school. That's a nice way of saying you're older.
I think dinosaur is the term. People, the critics call me a dinosaur.
And
Yes.
you were making fun of, you guys have your acronyms that you make fun of each other, and you had a bunch for the
Yes.
FBI. So do you believe in these FBI criminal profilers and others?
Wow. So I'll use Scott's phrase. That's a loaded question. And I'm always very shy about expressing my opinions.
Yes.
I would say, in a general sense, to use that term criminal profiling, those of us who have been in the business, we do it every day.
Hmm.
So, and I'm talking about guys that are on patrol, the harness bulls out there, from guys that do what I did and what Scott did. So I don't think it's a dirty word. I know it has been turned into that by the people that would like to see criminals treated more gingerly. But so I think there is something to it. Now, in regard to the FBI and behavioral analysis and all that kind of thing, I really love the show Criminal Minds. However, that was so far from the truth about what they really do that, only maybe some of us that are in the business realize that. But I had a couple of moments with those folks, and after the discussion was completed and I heard what they had to say, I just kind of looked at my partner and I said, we said that 2 hours ago. So there you go. It was, they just kind of affirmed what we already thought. So I would say there's a place for it, and we have to do it. I mean, look, I've talked about what I would do is psychological autopsies, excuse me, which is the same equivalent as profiling. I mean, we want to know what's making these people tick, and there are going to be certain things, certain attributes of the criminal that are going to be common. So I don't think it's a dirty word, and I subscribe to it, as does Scott. So
there you go. There's the answer. We are going to be discussing the evildoer is in the news in a big way once again. So every time we do that, I like to remember the victims. Of course, we've got Madison Mogan, 21, Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20. Let us not forget them. They, by the way, they received posthumous degrees, Fil Waters, at graduation. That's pretty touching. What do you think of that they were awarded their diplomas?
I think that's awesome. I think that is most appropriate. I mean, those young folks worked hard, and it's just so, I mean, words are indescribable in terms of how unfortunate and horrible the events that occurred that have prevented them from stepping on that stage and receiving them.
Yeah. We're going to stick with it, but Catherine's checking in from your area now, Phil. Aloha from the Valley Isle to Phil on the Big Island, to Scott, Joel, Carmen, STS Global Nation. Phil, can you reveal this week's Hawaiian shirt? It has something to do with Elvis. Is that right?
This is the Elvis Presley Blue Hawaii Aloha shirt today.
And does that mean that Elvis wore that very same shirt at one point when he was on the Big Island or near you?
No.
No.
It was just the Aloha shirt that was to commemorate the movie Blue Hawaii starring Elvis Presley.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Look at this. Shaquille Oatmeal. As you guys know, I'm convinced it is Shaq who is going by this name, because no one would ever think he would go by the name Shaq Oatmeal. And I have a feeling, he's at one point, he was a criminal justice guy, became a cop at one point, Shaq, or has an honorary police something or other. So this definitely is Shaq. He says, well, hello, best show ever. Facts. So Shaq, anytime you want to come on, you have an open invite. Got the Oregon Coast checking in here, and Frankie Figs, a friend of the show. So, Scott Duffey, we're going to circle back to a bunch of different things, but the family of Kaylee Gonzalez spoke out this past week, and Christy Gonzalez, the mother, said that when she saw Brian Kohberger for the first time at an initial court appearance, and I quote here, "I was completely overwhelmed. I actually almost thought I was going to pass out." And then she went on to say, "My daughter saw him face to face and in a very different light than we saw him, sitting there in court looking very meek." That is a weird thing to reconcile. Like, when you do see him in court, he looks like this kind of nerdy, soft-spoken, dorky, for lack of a better adjective, kind of guy. And then to think that he is accused of these heinous crimes, what do you think that must be like, especially for the mother of one of the victims, but just for anyone to kind of try to negotiate that in their mind, that this guy sitting in front of them could have possibly been responsible for all this?
Unimaginable. And this is why in Idaho and I imagine every prosecuting agency in existence has some great social workers, clinicians, victim assistance coordinators that are guiding people each and every step of the way of the court process. So you have the victims' families coming in for the first time and facing what they believe, because remember, this is a charged document. There is evidence to support enough to charge. So when you have an individual, it's not just somebody they picked out. This is somebody that the evidence is pointed to, and enough where probable cause says, hey, this is the person that the police say did these horrible crimes. So you have people that are guiding the victims' families to say, you're going to be thinking all sorts of things, and try to calm them down, try to help them to remember, think of your family, think of your loved ones and all the good times. Don't think too much of the individual that you're going to see. You're going to tremble, you're going to cry, you're going to shake, you're going to have anger, you're going to have every imaginable emotion. So you do have people there guiding them. With that being said, I can't imagine what they're going through. And then, of course, every step leading to closer to either a trial or some sort of plea. But yeah, there are very few people, I would say, even in my career, where I've seen the face of something horrible display itself in a courtroom, where you see like evil personified, as opposed to where the crime is committed and whatever it is that they are exhibiting, and then all of a sudden it's showtime and they get to be in front of a camera, in front of people, and put on a completely different face. And to me, that's a little more scary.
So Fil Waters, there was supposed to be this mini trial, a preliminary hearing on June 26. I believe it was the day you traveled to Hawaii. There was a grand jury indictment. Some people call it a secret grand jury because no one really knows about it except for the state and the people who are called as jurors and witnesses. And they indicted them. And it said in the wording of the indictment says, Brian Kohberger, 28, quote unquote, did unlawfully enter a home in Moscow, Idaho, and then did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, kill and murder. And they list the victims. Were you surprised at this turn of events that it was that he was suddenly indicted when we were expecting this hearing to take place?
No, I was not. Their system, I guess, is just the mechanics of it is a little bit different there than it is in Texas. So this indictment, of course, they go into this part of it is the same. They went into a grand jury. They presented what they had, and just enough for the grand jury to determine that there was enough probable cause to move forward with a trial. So that eliminated the the pretrial hearing that was scheduled in June. And I think it's just the quickest way to a destination is a straight line. So why move into June with this hearing when you can accomplish the same thing in a better time frame and get him indicted and let's move on. So I'm not surprised that the prosecutors made that decision.
Talia is watching in Israel. Happy Global Friday, STS. Joel, Scott, the silent assassin, and Phil, the Hawaiian Magnum PI. Don't worry, everyone. Phil, has your Ferrari, your red Ferrari, has that arrived yet?
It has not. It is en route.
So are you on a bicycle right now or what?
Oh no, we've got transportation here. I mean, if push comes to shove, I could saddle up one of the horses out here in the pasture. But,
Phil, do you want to do what you did for me and Scott and show people your spread there? Or are you too shy? Well, prefer not to. Look at this. Look at Phil's life of luxury. Look at that. Look at that, everyone. That is the view out his window. In case anyone has jealousy or envy like me, you can now be jealous and envious of Phil.
There are the horses down there between the posts. I don't know if you can see them, but yeah, got a couple of fine-looking horses down there. We have G, and we have Hitman.
Wow! And do you go and scratch them under the chin occasionally?
Oh yeah, we go down. I'll just step out the door here and give them some carrots, and yeah.
I'm definitely coming to visit. Phil, no truer statement has ever been said as Mary Goff is right here. Dogs are the best. I absolutely concur. London is in the house. And Catherine repeating the name. High Nugget, Little Nugget is here. So, Scott Duffey, as part of this grand jury indictment, I'm still trying to figure this out. We had the Ada County prosecutor on last night. It seems to me like the state has to bring some sort of exculpatory evidence, some sort of wow factor to this whole in order to indict. Is that in fact true or not true? Both of you guys are shaking your heads like I'm an idiot. So, Scott Duffey, what's the deal with the grand jury?
You want us to answer that question and verify it?
I prefer that you don't. But Scott, what's the deal with this? How do these grand juries, I know it's different in every state, but how do they work generally speaking?
I'll give you the federal point of view in the Fed system, for example, in the District of Delaware, there is always a sitting grand jury, and they'll serve for the better part of my memory might be escaping, but they'll serve the better part of, I believe, 18 months.
In Idaho, it's 6 months. I know that.
Okay, 6 months. So it's very possible that a grand jury was already in session, and whenever you have a case that can be brought forth, you then can present it, as opposed to like a jury trial and then picking a jury, and which can be time consuming and so forth. Not in the grand jury, and so the grand jury's already sat, and so thereby cases on a regular basis are going before the grand jury. So the grand jury, and I would believe it would be in the same on the same level in Idaho, the grand jury will negate the need for a preliminary hearing. And so, for the public, they were probably, including myself, hoping for some, whether it be a couple hours or a couple of days of a prelim, and that the public can see. So the grand jury will negate that. And when they say on Monday he'll plead just like he did at an arraignment, not guilty, right? So it is a statement of charges, the same charges, right? There might be even additional charges, and he'll provide with his attorneys another plea as if this was the very beginning, and so thereby there will be set some more court dates. They could be suppression hearings. They could be other type of hearings that would be pre-trial. But ordinarily, the prelim, where it's kind of a mini trial in a case like this, would be negated. So you won't be seeing that.
And Jean Fisher, who was a prosecuting attorney in Ada County, which is different than Latah, but still Idaho, she said she would not be surprised if no plea is entered on Monday morning, that they asked for a continuance for a little more time from the judge. So it'll be interesting to see that. We do know that unlike Lori Vallow, it will be televised. There's going to be a crush of media attention about that. Patty G writes, Fil Waters talking baby talk to a chihuahua. That's Phil's equivalent of the minivan, followed by.
I call her my little big dog.
Your little big dog. And does she live in the home or does she live in another home?
When we're here, she stays here. In fact, I had to send a text message to her owners to let them know that we're back, and Nugget rode up the hill with us yesterday. And what's the arrangement now this year? And so it was they have pretty much given in, and the Nugget is going to do what Nugget wants to do, and so she's going to come up here, and they just asked that we bring her back down there on a regular basis.
So Nugget is either the most disloyal dog ever to live, or possibly the most loyal, that she runs away from her family for you, Fil. When she gets here, you must have part dog whisper in you, Fil. That's great.
It's just the effect I have.
Yeah, look at that. MC Spunky, Fil and Scott, good for the soul, like chicken soup for the soul, Fil and Scott for the soul. And then Scott Duffey for you from Old Lady Snoop. Scott remembers when those license plates in Pennsylvania were ugly blue and gold and said Commonwealth of PA. I think if I remember correctly, we're talking the 70s. Jersey used to have similarly ugly plates, but
and it said you had a friend in Pennsylvania.
Friend in Pennsylvania. There you go. And I do, Scott Duffey, although he's in Delaware. So there you go. Fil, back to this grand jury. They seal the witness list. So we do not know who testified, but there is a chance that there was new people involved or new evidence involved, but we are not going to know this until the trial. Is that correct? And anything else you'd like to add about the grand jury process for the greater public here?
Well, the grand jury process is in confidence. None of that stuff is supposed to be released. And you mentioned exculpatory evidence and so forth and so on. The prosecution must provide all evidence to the defense. And if they do not, then they are in danger of a Brady, and in Texas, a Morton violation of law. For not providing all evidence, especially anything that might be exculpatory.
Miss Demeanor says, yay, Carm is back. I forgot to place her back here. Scott and Fil, you'll both appreciate the story. I brought Carm into the bedroom, which sounds a little weird, but I had to lean her against a wall in there. And at 3 a.m, when my wife got up to go use the potty, she screamed because she saw a woman staring at her, and it was her. It was Carm. Some people even think she's real here at times, but she will be live and real on Sunday night. So I know never to. Actually, I should put it back there to scare her again tonight. So Fil Waters, you're gonna probably have something to say about this. Dateline airs tonight. I like to promote other shows like Dateline. I used to work for NBC News and MSNBC. They're doing a 2-hour special on The Evildoer tonight. And according to some little birds in my ear, I have far-reaching tentacles. There's going to be new information revealed on Dateline having to do with the knife. What that is, I don't know. What it could be, I don't know. It could be, there could be some other new information. Several of the people who have appeared on here are going to be on there tonight. Are you interested to see this? And I know that's a yes or no. So beyond just yes or no, are you curious as to any possible developments or new information that could be revealed this evening?
You talking to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Little taxi driver there.
Yeah, you talk.
Yeah, I will be watching. It will be interesting to see what they have. I'll be particularly curious to see what they have. They're specific to the knife, and which may mean something about they've discovered the source of where the knife was obtained and so forth and so on. I don't know that there's a whole lot to be revealed other than that. And it will be interesting to see if they have any other information. But, you know how it is. Joel, you've been in the business and I've been in it just a little bit, but, that's the teaser, right? And then sometimes they come out with this big, you're expecting a big explosion and it ends up being a black cat firecracker.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm not expecting that much, but it'll be interesting. Phil, back to you for a second. With this court hearing on Monday, when you see him, I mean, you're not looking at him the way a lot of other people are looking at him. So tell us, how are you looking at him in court? What are you looking for? What are you looking at?
Well, I just want to see if there's going to be, if he's exhibiting any other behavioral body language and the way he's talking with the attorneys for that may be different than what we have seen. And then I like to compare and contrast with the different places where we have video recording of him in different scenarios having discussion. So we saw, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but we talked about the interaction that he had with I think it was the Washington State University patrolman, where he went through the intersection and all that good stuff. And it's always interesting to watch his demeanor and the way he comes across, and if he's consistent with the way he exhibits that behavior, or does it change based on who he is around or talking to. So, yeah, I want to see kind of where he's at. It's going to give us some indicators, and we'll compare and contrast that from the first time that we saw him being escorted out in handcuffs, and now where we see him in the courtroom where decisions are being made to move this process forward.
And Phil, while I have you, this has come up many times before, but I'm wondering if you've come up with your own conclusion now from Faro Gamma. What is the likelihood that the 1122 King Road murder suspect skinned Buddy the dog, that dog that was skinned prior to killing the 4 college students? This fits the profile of a fantasy killer. Have you pondered that any further since all this went down?
I have not, and
I hope Nugget.
It's possible. I mean, anything's possible. I don't know that it's probable, given the evidence that we know at this point in time. I don't, unless that's something. I mean, who knows? Maybe Dateline's got some line on that tonight, but I don't know that there's going to be any link between the two at this point.
And look at this. Just when you thought you've heard it all, STS Nation comes through again from Sarah. My grandfather is credited with helping to discover Elvis. He's in any book you read on Elvis. Sarah, tell us, reveal the name, please. And then you've got Michelle Cavernos. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Michelle, friend of the show in Cape Town, South Africa, in the house. Represent, as she says. So as part of this, they went through a lot of the evidence, Scott Duffey, the old white sedan that was repeatedly cruising past the rental home, traces of DNA found on the knife sheath, which we just talked about, which there may or may not be new information on, cell phone buzzing near the homes dozens of times, items at the parents' home, including dark clothing, medical gloves, a flashlight, and then the stuff they pulled from Pullman, the Pullman apartment. Which of those, if any, strike you as kind of the strongest evidence that would hold up in a court case like this?
obviously anything that they've recovered and have tested, anything that would have DNA on it, right? If you have anything that is linking any one of those items recovered from the university, from his apartments, from his house in Pennsylvania, if whether it be fabric, whether it be hair, DNA, blood, anything that you can forensically tie back to King Road, to the victims. Remember, he's tramping dirt. He's trampling everything around the house and in the house. Could be brought into a shoe, onto a pant, cuff, anything like that, anything minutely that is painstakingly going through a lab that could be tied back to coming from the residence would be amazing. And I would imagine by this time, if anything has come back positive, that it would be, by now, and thereby could have made its way into a grand jury testimony. And then, of course, everything they recovered digitally, the phones, the computers, whether he took pictures, whether, and there are things in the phone that they would be able to do outside of towers that can tie that phone more specifically to a location. So it's, they have a trove of evidence. And then, of course, anything that would tie anything that they recovered, even, they took more than one knife, they took knives. And if there's any shred of anything that can be forensically tied back to a victim or the location, would be tremendous for prosecution. Anything that tests positive and is going to be fantastic. Everything else, whether it be witnesses and understanding and his psychology and whatnot, that's all secondary that could play into it, but nothing like the evidence that they've recovered and ultimately testing it and tying it back to the residence or to a victim.
And we are going to discuss other stories tonight, including Lori Vallow in just a moment, and one that I specifically picked out for Phil because I know he's going to love to talk about it. But Fil Waters, we talked about this a little last night. I'm curious to get your take. What kind of client do you think Brian Kohberger must be for Ann Taylor, his attorney, and what kind of nemesis will he be for the state after viewing that body cam footage you just referenced from the Pullman, Washington stop? It seems like he likes to ask a lot of questions. Do you think he's going to be a giant pain in the ass to both sides?
That's a close-ended question, of course.
I'm sorry.
I don't think I'm able to give you a yes or no on that. I think he understands fully where he is, and I think he may think he knows more than he really does about the system and about the way this thing is going to go. We kind of saw that with his passive-aggressive stuff in that video. And I think that attitude, I think what we saw there was about as close as we're going to get to the real evildoer. So I don't see him changing much. He, as most of us, our personalities are what they are. And I don't see him making any particular adjustments because he's in this situation. So whether he's uncooperative or not, we'll just have to see to what degree that may manifest itself into. I think he's going to be very cooperative with his attorneys. I think it's interesting that he has a female attorney. And when we look at what he's alleged to have done, my question is, what is going on in his head regarding her and their relationship? So those are the questions I have, is just what's kind of like to be a fly on the wall in those discussions between her and him.
Scott Duffey, Tolly asking, or wondering, I should say. I always wondered how he encountered Kohberger, Xana, or Ethan. The DoorDash food was on the counter. I think they are collateral damage, unfortunately. What do you think happened? That's an open-ended question, Phil. So, Scott, I can learn from Tolly. And what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I really could not tell you if, at least from what I've read and seen so far, if Xana and Ethan are just absolutely collateral damage, and because then my thought would be, so why not then with the witness that you have? Why all of a sudden does he flee if he noticed her? And it seems like he would have. So, he had an agenda, and I'm pretty sure it's known now to law enforcement who specifically was targeted, if not just one of the victims. And you have two different floors. So you have the initial encounter, right? And you have that rage. And this is where like behavioral science is providing everything they could, as possibilities. But I've always said before, what the motive lies with him alone. And so everything can play into, who exactly was the target and who's going to be considered 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 and 4 totally collateral damage on the way out. So there's a lot on the table, and there is still, at least from where I sit, some mystery. And it's still a little tough to kind of consider, why the one remaining that he encountered, why not the same? So there's still some confusion.
Marshall Dove. Yes,
Can
sir.
I address that?
Yes, sir. You may.
I don't think he saw her.
Mm.
I think, when something like that happens, when you have your purpose has been completed in terms of what he was doing in there, and I agree completely with Scott. I don't know if we talked about this before, but Ethan and Xana were, no doubt, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think that, this is just my speculation, so just everybody calm down. I think that Ethan heard the scuffle or heard something that awakened him, and he stepped out, and he's standing there, and now he's got to take care of business, which means he's got to take care of the other problem that's further into the bedroom. So when he has done this, now we got to remember that he has just now slaughtered 4 people. And what does he want to do? He wants to get the hell out of there. And when those kinds of things happen, I've been involved in shootings, officer-involved shootings, and I can tell you that all that stuff happens that you hear about. Your ears close off, you get tunnel vision, and you're focused. In his case, I believe he's focused on the exit. So if she was in a place, and remember, it's dark in there. So, and everything that I have read, I don't get the sense that she stepped out into the hallway. And if she did, in the darkness and so forth and so on, it may be that he is so focused in getting out that door that he just doesn't see her. He's spent way longer in that structure than he ever intended to. So I think that can be explained in terms of why he doesn't see her and why she remains. Because I did read somewhere where she saw him, and then at some point, at least to the degree that she could describe the mask and the bushy eyebrows, and that she closed the door and stepped back and got back in her bed, which is common reaction to seeing whatever she saw. So I don't think there's going to be a big question when at the end of the day, when it comes to, and I hate that phrase, by the way, so strike that, why he may not have seen her or why he didn't respond to her.
Scott, Marshall Dove back here with another question. Is it likely or fact that BF and DM, they are the surviving roommates that Phil was just talking about, is it your hunch that they did in fact testify before this secret grand jury?
I can go from my experience that I typically would not have certain witnesses testify. I would testify to what statement I have taken. I would read a statement and in. There's a few reasons for doing that, and it all depends on the level of what maybe additional interviews of them after their initial police interview, where maybe some more information came out, and then it's like, okay, maybe we have them testify. But I typically would keep my witnesses out of the grand jury. I would testify as to what my investigation was, statements that were provided to me. It also helps kind of preserve, because remember, grand jury statements are still on record, and so thereby all that is recorded, and so you could have a statement in a grand jury that would be introduced later in a trial. So it would be better for me as an investigator to state what is stated. I would read verbatim a statement that is provided, and then allow the witness to testify for the first time, if need be, actually in trial. This way, there's nothing prior that a witness might have said off the cuff, mistakenly so or whatnot, that can then be used against them. So I don't know. I would venture to say they, might not have testified.
Phil, we are getting a deluge of questions regarding Hawaii. Julie wants to know, who I met from the UK, if you ride these horses or just feed them carrots and apples. And the predominant question is, what do you do in Hawaii every day? What is your, do you have a singular activity that you enjoy?
Live life. Look, it's a whole different atmosphere here. So for me here, it is just a renewal in every form, physically, mentally, spiritually. It is just an awesome place, and we just, my wife and I, we just enjoy being surrounded by God's creation. It's amazing.
Very nice.
Well, so to answer the question about do you ride?
Yes.
Let me expound on that just a second. I have ridden here. In fact, I did a cattle drive up here, but I don't ride those horses. And my dad was a cowboy, and so I've grown up around livestock and horses all my life. In fact, we used to own. I had four Appaloosas at one point in time, and they kind of ate us out of house and home. So they had to go to other people.
It does not surprise me that Fil Waters comes from a family of cowboys. He's an American original, Fil Waters. Phil, back to you on this real quick. So Steve Gonzalez and his wife were interviewed by ABC News and a couple other media outlets this week. And Steve Gonzalez, and I'm paraphrasing now, said, "We are pit bulls. We want to see the evidence, and then I'm going to bring it." He said that is an actual quote. I didn't know they have a family with 5 kids. I did not know that. But this was interesting to me. The mother was asked, and she says, "I've thought long and hard about if Kaylee and Kohberger could have crossed paths. We've talked as a family, you know, we've done a lot of research on what's out there. None of it makes sense. They have not been able to establish a connection. In your career, did you find parents, mothers, fathers retracing steps after homicides, trying to, you know, figure out why it happened? Could they have done something differently? You know, if their child didn't take a left turn instead of a right turn, do you see them doing this sort of questioning after the fact?
Oh, I do. I have. Yes. It's always heart-wrenching. I mean, from the detective's standpoint, and having those discussions with family in a continuing investigation, because there are no words. I mean, all I can do is having suffered some tragedy in my life on a personal level, not with a family member. Well, actually with a family member, but I can empathize with those feelings. Now, I always caution them to, as hard as it is for them to control themselves. I've had a couple of cases where I had family members, a sister that wanted to get in front of those cameras and wanted to say things, and I had to pull her in and tell her that what she's doing is not helping the investigation. And it's just a tough thing to have that conversation, because I know where they're coming from, but they've got to take a step back. And, you know, and I understand Mr. Goncalves says, I understand this. He's been this way from the beginning of this thing. And there have been some things that have been said and that have been attributed to him, and he denies. And I mean, it just causes a whole new set of problems that, again, distract from the investigation. And in this case, at this point, will distract from the prosecution. I know it's tough for them, but they have got to quit getting in front of these cameras just so they can vent some more. I mean, I get it, but again, I would just caution this continual getting in front of these cameras and saying stuff.
Bundy data, Scott. This is an interesting question that I have not pondered. If he pleaded guilty, assuming, you know, he enters a guilty plea on Monday morning, would the evidence then be made public suddenly?
So he's not going to. I would bet a lot he's not going to plead guilty Monday. It is no different than an arraignment. So that's why I say it's more than likely it will just be a plea that's just going to extend time. We're just going to get rid of the prelim. So yes, if he pled guilty. So for example, and I know every place is just a little bit different, but if he were to plead guilty in a federal court, the judge will then, as if the trial were to go on, the judge, in a very public manner, so all recorded, all for public consumption, would then question the suspect in a way that satisfies the judge. So the judge, knowing of all the evidence that's going to be put forth, the judge would say, okay, so you pled guilty to this. If this were to go to trial, the judge would make public if the prosecution would present evidence this, you would then say that. Your attorneys would have the chance to question the witnesses that have already been made known to the court by then. If this person were to come up and say this, are you accepting all that? And ultimately the suspect has to say yes, very clearly, before the judge on public record, that yes, I am guilty. I am guilty as a result of doing this. I'm guilty because I did this with that. The evidence that has already been provided to my attorneys, whether it be knives, digital, this is all true. So it would be a way for the suspect to come out and publicly say why you're negating a trial and pleading guilty, and you're doing it with a sound mind. and with all the facts that have been laid forth and with your attorneys. And so thereby the judge wants to make sure for any possible appeal that the defendant wasn't snowballed, the defendant wasn't, drugged and was like, oh, sure, I'm pleading guilty. No, so it would absolutely be made very public but there might be things that would be kept, as opposed to it going to trial and being made known. But I think pretty much by the end of all this, trial or no trial, the evidence will be made known.
And someone, Tali, pointing out Dr. Gary Bricado appears on Dateline tonight. He's amazing, so spot on when he did Kohberger profile before he was caught. Fascinating man, followed by this. Gary is brilliant. He really profiled BK to a T. He did, along with Dr. Ann Burgess. So switching gears here. By the way, there was one other question, Phil, that apparently the evildoer has lost a lot of weight, and it's noticeable. What do you read into that, if anything, other than the prison food is not very good when it comes to vegan options?
Well, in my experience, they usually pack on the weight, getting all those mashed potatoes and all forms of potatoes and that kind of thing. They kind of put on that weight. Now, in his case, he's supposed to be a vegan of some repute. Is that what I understand?
Correct, sir.
Well, there may not be, as you just said, there may not be a big variety of vegan menus there in the prison system. So they're stuffing, cabbage and lettuce and whatever rabbit food at him all the time. And that would cause him to lose weight. Plus, I mean, who knows? The anxiety, to whatever level that's occurring. There's a whole lot of factors here that would cause him to lose some weight. So I don't find that particularly unusual, but I know when I've gone to trial on guys 2 or 3 years, 4 years later, when they walk in that courtroom and sit down at the table and then they ask you to identify them, in most cases, I seem to recall that it looked like they had gained weight, not lost it. So.
And Sarah giving us the answer, the guy who founded or discovered Elvis, Sam Morrison, he owned Knox Record back in Knoxville, the best grandfather ever. That's cool. That's very cool.
I've heard that.
And Andy School. I think there's more about the knife than we know yet. Actually, about 51.5 terabytes are known we aren't privy to. They did reveal there's like 51.5 terabytes. That's an obscene amount of evidence that is available to, I guess, the state and eventually the defense. So we will see. But switching gears here, if we're going to ever get to any other stories, which I'd like to do, the Lori Vallow Daybell jurors spoke out, Fil Waters. And there was a man named Saul Hernandez. I forget his actual juror number, but he was one of them who sat through 6 weeks almost to the day of that trial. And he revealed that he was sort of one of the lone holdouts. He wasn't really convinced from the get-go, as many others were, that she was guilty. But then he said during the trial, he said he found it, quote unquote, hard to look at Vallow as more and more grueling evidence emerged. Growing up, we were taught good and bad, God and evil. And I think for the first time in my life, I put a face to evil. And he said he was disgusted by photos of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell smiling through their beach wedding in Hawaii just weeks after their kids were killed. What about the power of the evidence, of the photos in evidence that seemed to really help steer him toward the guilty verdict?
Well, the jurors, he was explaining how he got through that process and the questions that he had. And that's why we have the system we have. You have 12 people in there that, for the most part, are going to have a different perspective of the evidence that they've all viewed. It's the old, you put those 12 people in a line and you tell the one on one end a story and tell them to pass it on down the line. And by the time you get to that 12th person, it isn't going to be the same story that it started. So that's the purpose of having 12 different viewpoints of the same type of evidence. And so it doesn't surprise me that you've got one that looked at the evidence in a certain way, and then there was a certain part of that evidence that allowed him to come to the conclusion that she was in fact guilty. So I think that that's not uncommon at all. And in this case, you just got one that came out and it kind of explained the process. We had the same thing with the Murdaugh trial. You know, he had a couple of the jurors that came out and explained what it was that caused them to come back with a guilty verdict.
The same juror, Scott Duffey, went on to say, and this is a direct quote, "I just couldn't believe how someone can be that happy when your kids are in the ground and the person that was key in all of this is sitting across from you, smiling at you and dancing with you on the beach." They wanted to believe something that only applied and benefited them, only applied and benefited those people they liked, their circle that they liked and wanted to be around. Part of what he is referencing there, I think, too, is some of the courtroom antics when she was smiling and giggling and chuckling with her attorneys. Was that a fatal flaw on her part in terms of her behavior? And I don't think it's anything that could have been controlled, but maybe the defense should have tried to rein her in a little bit. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. They should have tried better, but it's, I agree with you. It's a very difficult thing to control. That's what gives law enforcement, Phil and I, the edge when we're interviewing somebody. We just have this experience of understanding human behavior, and you try to just try to peel back that onion and get to the core. So that's what I love about a jury. You have 12 different types of people from 12 different backgrounds. And for some, it's just one piece of evidence. For others, it's got to be a totality of evidence. And for others, it's okay, the evidence might have taken me there, but I'm just witnessing what I see before me. And I don't see somebody who I think I would look like. And that's what every juror is doing, putting themselves in that chair and thinking, I would be overwhelmed with grief. I would be overwhelmed with fear. I would be overwhelmed with whatever, as opposed to happy-go-lucky. I just had celebrated a great Hawaiian wedding, and my children are buried in the backyard. So yeah, it's all that takes place, and that's what I love about these juror interviews, where they really get into what it is that clicked for them, and it is part of the experience. It is justice, and people should be able to put everything together and make a decision. And like he said, he was a holdout. He was probably maybe gonna vote to acquit, but he couldn't deny what was before him, and that was the face he saw.
He said he was the only holdout. Astra, who I met yesterday, juror number 8, Joel, about 10 people told me he was juror number 8. And then there was Tiffany, jury number 17, who did not want her last name revealed. But Fil Waters, I immediately thought of you, because she said, it's been an incredibly surreal experience for me. It was just so bizarre. And she goes on to say it was almost like, one of those little puzzles with 1,000 pieces in it. And you're putting, little pieces together slowly. Fil Waters always goes, solving a crime is like a puzzle. You start here, work in. That's my Phil impression. So Phil, it's interesting. Instinctively, she was putting the puzzle together the same way you do. By the way, she said she had a daughter the same age as Tylee, and that struck her. And also, they were given no warnings about these graphic photos, and they had been offered some sort of mental health counseling. And she says that she is likely going to engage in it because it was very difficult. So, Phil, back to you. What about jurors in general in terms of their doing their civic duty? And she had this natural instinct to do what you do, and did for a living, which is piecing this puzzle together to probably get the correct verdict here.
Well, that is what they are commissioned to do. That's why they're put on that jury. They are there to look at all of the evidence. And after they've gone through, in most cases, once they've gone through the voir dire and they've picked the jury, those are the people that the defense and the prosecutors have both collaborated together with to select these 12 people and a couple, 2 or 3 alternates. So the process don't happen in a vacuum. One thing leads to another. And remember, Lady Justice has a blindfold on her. And that is symbolic of the fact that, again, these defendants, whoever they are, I have a presumption of innocence in this process. The defense does not have to prove their client did not do this thing. It is the burden is on the prosecution to prove that they did. And so the jurors, and I think Scott and I both said it, you never know what a jury's going to do. That's the unknown in this whole process. And when I'm on the stand testifying and I look the jurors right in the eye, and I will make my own evaluation as I look at the jury, and I'll come out of there and I'll think to myself, okay, well, this one, and I'll even talk with the prosecutor. So when they get back in that room, sometimes when after a trial is completed and I've been allowed to go back and talk to the jury, they want to talk to me and talk about what the strong parts of the evidence were, what parts that they had some questions about, and so forth and so on. So it's a very interesting process. And in a case like this, of course, there is going to be in all homicide cases, murder cases, capital murder cases, there's going to be a level of emotion. But in a case like this, I imagine the emotion inside that jury room was palpable. I'm sure there were people responding to these pictures. And this one juror that says that they offered him some sort of psychological resources if they were affected by what they saw in that. Look, God bless them. I mean, that stuff, there are certain things, and I can tell you from experience, there are just things you're not going to be able to unsee. And so kudos to the people that do their civic duty, which is to serve on these juries and do the job that they're commissioned to do. So that I would commend anybody that has served on a jury and for their diligence and their ability to render a verdict.
Back to the evildoer for one sec. This is an interesting question from Tolly that I never even gave any thought to. Phil Scott, do you think they did a police lineup for Kohberger and brought the surviving roommates, or is it just in the Law and Order shows that they do that? And by the way, I thought it was the faint sound of a ukulele, but Catherine says, "Hey Phil, Jim Croce's on your TV. Good taste in music."
I'm a very eclectic. I have a lot of stuff in there. They're going to see some jazz, and going to see some classical music on there. They'll see some classic rock, and of course Jim Croce. Yes, he was. He actually died when I was in high school. My mom woke me up to tell me that Jim Croce had died in a plane crash in Louisiana.
We have our own set of investigators called STS Nation. But Scott Duffey, was there a police lineup at any point? Do they do that? When do they do that?
I would venture to say no in this case. That would just be my initial thought. I don't put a lot. I did early in my career, but that quickly went by the wayside. Because, talking about exculpatory evidence, if I present a photo array to somebody and maybe I didn't do my homework well enough to see if they would be able to pick them out of a lineup, because I'm not just putting a bunch of people together in a photo array and say, pick one out. I believe the evidence led me to pick somebody out and put him in a photo array. And so I feel pretty comfortable. But if a victim witness does not pick him out, that's a piece of evidence that's exculpatory. And so thereby defense can say, aha, so you got it wrong. And the victim witness says you got it wrong. And so ordinarily a photo array would only go if you really know that, for somebody's begging you, hey, I know who this is. It's very possible they even say a name, a nickname or whatnot. And so thereby, hey, you show me a photo array and I'll pick them out. So I know that from interviews prior to, and they'll be like, this is a good victim witness where a photo array is going to help solidify. It's just one more piece to add to it, but I would venture to say here they didn't or shouldn't have.
Jory says the 51 terabytes Fil Waters are going to be from Amazon Alexa. That's probably a good guess there, Phil.
Let me say something about photo arrays. I agree with Scott. Look, there was a big deal in Texas where we had to, because we use photo arrays all the time, but they are just one piece of an investigation. And let me tell you, you should not ever, as a detective, rely on the identification in a photo array as an absolute of some kind. Because I have had investigations where it was like a parallel universe kind of thing, where I believe that this was the suspect. Now, when you do these photo arrays, of course, it's 6 similar looking individuals. And there is an admonition given to the person you're showing the photo array to, that I'm going to show you 6 similar looking individuals. And I just need you to look at every one of them. Don't just blow through it. Look at every one of them and see if there's anyone in there that is familiar to you in reference to the investigation we've got going on. So you make an admonition, and you certainly do not want to get into the point where you're influencing the identification. You don't even tell them that the person that you saw, the suspect, may be in this group of people, because you want this to be totally independent, their identification. And I've had them where they identified the person that I thought was the person. Then I go further into the investigation, and this person ends up not being associated at all. So they are one piece of the investigative process, and I just used them in that format because photo array, you tell them that they may not have the same hair, but you need to look at them and get them, so forth and so on. But it is a credit to the investigation when they do pick someone out, and you ask them to what certainty are you picking this person out, and they give you a percentage of some kind, and then you find the right person, and that identification becomes golden. Now, of course, the better way to do it in a lot of ways is to do live lineups. I've done a few of those, didn't use them all the time, but this identification stuff is just part of the investigation. It is not the thing that brings it ultimately to a conclusion, or it shouldn't, because you're going to have, if it's eyewitness testimony is all you have, that's a weak way to walk into a case. And there have been cases that have been tried with just witness testimony. And, later we find out that they misidentified that person. So, the use of photo arrays and those kinds of things have to be disciplined in their use.
Very interesting from an old school cop. Tiff Knox, Joel, you're slouching. I am. And then Astra jumps in. Joel's back has just popped up straight like a meerkat, because I heard my mother's voice when I read that message. So I had to jump up. And then Sensory Combustion, can't wait to see the new studio and proper chair. We're getting there. It's taken longer than I thought, but we're getting there. I have the most cockamamie setup here. I should take a photo so people can see behind the scenes, but I am turning into a human pretzel in order to bring you the best shot composition possible, but it is taking a toll on my back, and I will try to stand up straighter in the future. All right, so 2 other stories that I want to get to. This to me, and we'll wrap these pretty quickly because Phil has another nap to get to, and Scott Duffey, it's Friday night here in on the mainland, as they say. Have either of you heard of Nicholas Alaverdian, Scott or Phil?
No.
I don't think so. If I have it, you'll have to tell me what did he do?
All right, so this to me is the absolute most absurd true crime story going on internationally right now. Dateline did an episode. So this guy, he grew up in Rhode Island. He is a U.S. citizen who allegedly faked his own death to escape rape allegations. So, long story short, this is a wild Dateline episode.
Is this the guy that's the Scotsman, the Scottish?
Yeah, yes. Puts on the
yeah. I have heard of him, and I watched that show. That guy's a freaking nut job. Oh yeah, and he's in a wheelchair now with an oxygen.
In a wheelchair. That's him. So here's the deal. And I'll just break it down, and then and then there's another one I want to get to. We've got a whole for the UK fans. These are 2 UK stories coming to you. So this guy grew up in Rhode Island, and he was put into the foster care system and was apparently very troubled. But he then, I don't know, went on to get involved in politics at a very young age, like when he was in high school and
he was like
college.
A city councilman, wasn't he?
Like
in Rhode Island?
I don't know if he was ever elected, but he spoke. He decided to make the platform about the horrors of the foster care system and all these.
He got some legislation passed or something.
Yeah, some stuff happened in Rhode Island, and he long story short, the state representatives, a bunch of them took him under his wing and all this. But lo and behold, it turns out he had a serious anger and much more severe issues, and raped some ex-wife, and he's very young looking, sexually assaulted other women. They started to come forward, and he says he got really sick from 3 different types of cancers, I think, and passed away. And there was a press release almost that went out about this. And long story short, everyone at the state capitol in Rhode Island, they proclaimed it, Nicholas Alaverdian Day, whatever his name was at the time. Everyone was devastated. The FBI, Scott's old friends, called and said, wait a minute, don't mourn too quickly. We don't think he's dead. Turns out he escaped to Scotland. And this guy is just a character. I mean, crazy. And he had these very distinct tattoos, Fil Waters. But in the interview on Dateline, this is what's crazy. They say, can you roll he has like not a tat sleeve, but a tat here and tats here. And they say, can you roll your sleeve up? And he does. And there's no tattoo there. So Andrea Canning is like, what's going on here? It went all the way to the point where they had to get a barrister, a judge, whatever it is, whatever they call them in Scotland. And he had to rule on the identity. And ultimately, now fingerprints have shown that it is this guy from Rhode Island, Fil Waters. Who does this?
You talking about the guy?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I thought that's a funny case. I mean, that really's got a lot of humor in it. I mean, not to the degree that, I mean, the victims, it's not funny for them, of course, but I'm just talking about him as an individual.
Yes.
Because when he was, it seems like does he have a wife now, or he's got a girlfriend?
Yeah, he has a wife. So, and here's a quote directly from him in Scotland.
Right.
As he was wheeled in and out of court. He wears an oxygen mask because he claimed he had a very bad case of COVID. He says, we were once a normal family, but thanks to the media, our lives have been interrupted, as he's gasping into an oxygen mask in a very strange accent. And we like privacy, and I would like to go back to being a normal husband but I can't because I can't breathe. I can't walk. People say it's an act. Let me try to stand up. He stands up and he falls straight back.
Yeah.
Phil, this takes con men to a whole different level because it is like a clown act. Who is this guy? What's the deal?
Well, he got on there and it was almost like, my impression of him was he's like, he's like the Elephant Man, right? I am not a monster. One of those guys. It was amazing to watch the guy. And he did the little thing where he stood up out of the, does he think he's convincing anybody of anything other than he's just a knucklehead, So it's a very interesting case. And he apparently had some good, and the woman, his wife, she's all up into this con as well. So I don't know what he's promising her, but that is a crazy, crazy story. That is just insanity, especially where he started with the politics. And he worked for something. He was like in it. Yeah. Maybe he ran for office and he didn't win or something, but wherever he lived there in Rhode Island, I'll tell you what, those people ate it up, and he just around and jammed it right up their backside. So.
Yeah, 100%. And the crimes were hideous. He raped these women, and he would turn like on a dime, and was and one woman secretly recorded everything, which helped to catch him. But it is a crazy story. Lorna says he looks so weird.
That guy is a freaking monster. Yes.
Phil, how long will it take for this extradition to get him back here and put this guy where he belongs?
Well, I think isn't he in Scotland? Isn't he up there?
Yeah, and now they're I think the extradition process has begun. If you guys haven't seen this, you got to. Scott Duffey's looking at us like we're crazy, but you got to Google.
Well, we've talked about this before. There is a process.
Yeah.
Extradite people. And we have an extradition treaty with the UK, of course, but it still takes time. It is a process. And of course, if he's going to fight it, which I'm sure he is, it will take, it's just the process. It's just going to take longer. It will eventually happen. But again, it's always amazed me how the system is this insatiable monster. It needs to have as much bureaucratic bullcrap feeding it as possible. Nothing is ever streamlined, and it is made more difficult by whichever way the political winds are blowing. That can either make the process easier or make the process more difficult. So again, we're just going to be subject to the time it takes to get him where he needs to be.
Yes, and he needs to be there sooner than later. Julie Frew, originally from Scotland. You can get very lost in Scotland from Tolly. Ha ha ha, I love Friday. We will always encounter with at least one nut job story. There's plenty of nut jobs to go around. Julie Frew, barrister. Yes, Joel. So I got it right. A barrister. I would like to see Phil in a barrister wig. That would be kind of funny, actually. I think it would fit him quite well. So the last story, this is where I'm going to, oh, by the way, hi, Art Girl is Reality. Became a YouTube member. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. So I'm going to get all the hate mail now. Because one of this, and this especially, I'm going to get the hate mail from the UK. You know what's coming right now. But, and I love you, Julie Frew and Astra and all of you. However, the one family I could care less about in the world is the royal family. I just don't, I get it, but I just don't get it. Never into fairy tales, never into that stuff. To me, it's like sci-fi. I'm not into sci-fi either. So I was in news. And what happened to Princess Di was horrific. It was my second or third year in news at that time. It was horrible. And she was an elegant woman. But again, there's enough drama in my own family. I don't care about the royals. And I don't get the fascination, but I get the fascination. With that said, Prince Harry and his wife, Scott Duffey, unless you've been living under a rock, said that they were involved in a chaotic car chase with the paparazzi in New York that could have resulted in a catastrophic outcome, their spokesperson alleged. The Sussexes were pursued by photographers after leaving the Women of Vision Awards at the city's Ziegfeld Ballroom in a convoy. And it turned out to be total nonsense, Scott Duffey. How much hate mail am I going to get? But Scott Duffey, are you a royal watcher? Are you glued to the royal family, Scott Duffey?
I think I'm in the confused state with you as to why the fascination. It's, I guess, because it's still something that attracts so much attention, while the rest of the world just tries to figure their own personal lives out. I don't, but yeah, I will say I probably watch it with some sort of odd sort of fascination, maybe because it's still in existence today. Did I watch the coronation? All about 3-4 minutes, but
did you really, Scott?
I forgot.
Oh my God! I wish you'd never shared that.
Phil, what's worse, the minivan or watching the coronation? I didn't even know the coronation.
I don't know what I'm going to do now.
I said it was an odd type of fascination.
Look at Adam Bluefire here. A lot more people strongly dislike the Royals than like them. In my opinion, I love that you can send your hate mail to Adam Bluefire. They are a grotesque representation of inequality and elitism. I would say that is followed by L. Rose here. My boyfriend is from England, and I cannot stand the Royals. I'm glad to know I'm not alone. I had to sit through the funeral and coronation. On a serious note, though, from Julie Frew, my daughter was baptized on the day she died. It was horrific here. I was actually at a wedding when she died, and the entire wedding, where everyone left the wedding to watch it on the television in the bar.
Everybody was crowding around the TV monitors in the casino.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. 97, I think it was. But Fil Waters, so basically the NYPD came out and said, I don't know what they're talking about. This was, they were in like a yellow cab too for some reason. And there were a couple of maybe near collisions, but it wasn't like a high-speed chase. It wasn't any. What do you make of this, Phil?
Well, look, I've told everybody I love history. I studied history. In terms of the history, I mean, I don't look at the Royals as being some sort of, elite and all that bull crap, because that's what they are. You're talking about centuries.
Look at Julie Frew. Look, she says we have an institution here.
Well, it is. And I mean, look, this business about let's destroy everything so that we can all feel the same is a bunch, is nonsense. Sorry.
Easy, Nugget.
Nugget is
this is where the show goes off the rail. She hates Jim Croce, apparently.
She's not. No. She's not happy. She's got something going on out here. It's okay, Nugget. It's okay.
I knew the show would go off the rails when I brought this up. Go ahead, Phil.
So I'm just going to. So from that perspective, I'm not following this nonsense because I think Charles is a goober head. I think he's always been a goober head, and his mother, Queen Elizabeth, that is a remarkable woman. And I have watched the documentaries about her. My wife and I we watched The Crown on Netflix. Very interesting. And of course the palace was denying that any of that was true. But anyway, but very interesting history. And they all have these different characters and personalities and how they get to where they get. And Charles, big-eared Charles is gonna ultimately be the king at some point, and now here he is. And I will I will say this, given what I have seen and read about the family, his father, his mother, he will never be the king that his mother was the queen, ever. And in fact, I think more of his son, William, who is the next successor to the throne, I think more of him in terms of his presence as that position than I do of Charles. And so, but it's an interesting history. I've been to the UK and have been to Scotland, and of course I've got Scottish and English blood in me. So it's very, very interesting. And I just think in terms of the way our society is turned into now, and the media, and they've been created into this monster of everybody either kind of love them or hate them kind of thing. But I don't think we destroy our institutions in countries. They're all different, and there's no sense in destroying histories or trying to realign them or reinvent them or turn them into something through the prism of what knuckleheads think today. So it's an interesting deal. I wish Harry and his lovely bride would disappear. I don't give a flying crap about anything they're doing at all. And this business about in the getting chased by the paparazzi, really. So we're trying to make this little connection between his mother and I'm telling you, I think that is disgusting. And they need to think about, because everything they're doing now is the book he wrote, all that. This is just for their own self-aggrandizement. And the thing about it is nobody cares. And so, the NYPD came out and said, no. I mean, there was some talk about he jumps from a SUV with his security personnel. And I'm sure they're not driving around what you would go down and get a 2023 Tahoe. They're going to have some other stuff in that thing because he's got a security people with him. So he and his lovely bride are going to jump out of that and get into a cab. What are you kidding me? I mean,
makes no sense. Are their vehicles bulletproof, Phil? Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact, but I would imagine that
there's security.
It's whatever large American-made SUV they're driving around is not the same one that you and I would go purchase. I don't know. They may be in a minivan for all I know.
By the way, speaking of minivans, Phil, I now have an image of you with Nugget on your lap watching The Crown. So everything has changed in just an instant now, Phil.
In the minivan.
Yeah, in the minivan. Yes, you should have it on your DVD player.
Minivans now, so I mean, we can put this whole thing. Yeah.
Marina, who I met yesterday, making the good point. A 2-hour high-speed chase in New York City is quite an adventure. LOL. Teresa, for you, Scott, are you by any chance of Irish descent, as she is in Ireland? What's the answer, Scott?
I'll say yes, but there's a little bit more to it. But yes, with a name like Duffey, I am Irish.
What's more to it, Scott? You don't have to share.
Well, Scott, you either are or you ain't. That's like almost being pregnant, that answer.
Yeah. I'm happy to tell you the short story. Do you want the short story?
Yeah, please.
I'm up for the long story. So whatever you got.
So of course, with a Duffey, that's you got to be Irish, and I know for sure my mother is Polish, so the Irish and the Polish. And then, of course, as my father died very, very young, and I was very, very young. And then, of course, with 23andMe and other family members testing and so forth, we realized there's no Irish. Where's the Irish? And then, of course, we've learned over the years, my father and his sister were adopted by my fantastic Irish grandparents.
Oh, wow.
And so I hold to the Duffey name, but I will say I have a considerable amount of Jewish heritage, definitely Polish heritage, and a couple other mixtures in there, as many people find out. So it's a nice culture history lesson.
He's just gone from the silent assassin.
Scott, if I might take up my friend here. So Scott is Irish in spirit.
Yeah.
And in name.
You're now a nice Jewish boy, Scott. Mary P., the Royals feel like mascots to me. Something that said it costs each person £1.60 in taxes to afford these mascots. Seems worth it to me for a sense of national pride. Followed by Stephanie, I hate Charles. Followed by, as a first-generation American on my dad's side, I love the royal family and the ceremony. I was elated to watch the Jubilee. Nugget has her opinion about the royal family. We'll leave it with this. So trending on Twitter, is this fair or unfair, Fil Waters? It is trending, or was after this for a few days. Hashtag Harry and Meghan Smollett. Remember Jussie Smollett, but they were hashtagging. So the trend was Harry and Meghan Smollett. Is that unfair, Fil Waters?
Well, fair is what you pay a taxi, which is what they did not get into unsecured, right? So that's what they're alleging. I would say that any criticism their way, and any connection, any kind of contrast you want to make with Mr. Smollett, I think it is completely accurate and appropriate.
By the way, I'm getting messages on my phone that Datelines, Keith Morrison, we all know he's in the middle of the investigation there from his home in probably Malibu. Not that I love Keith Morrison, and I would love for him. I would actually, I don't know, pay a lot of money that I don't have for him to voice over the opening to my show. I love the guy, but I don't think he's on the ground doing a lot of reporting himself anymore, and he shouldn't be at his age. But they are revealing that he's going to have new information about the Idaho killer. Dateline should be paying me for promoting this right now, but they are not. So it's going to be an interesting show. And I was looking up. We have on Sunday night, a quick programming note, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We have Troy Lambert. He's one of a couple of guests we're going to have on Brian Kohberger. He is a murder mystery writer, and he also has a media publication in Idaho, and his son was at the University of Idaho during these horrific killings. So he is joining us on Sunday night live with this one. And then on Monday, we have Tara Malik, a Boise, Idaho attorney on the Kohberger court case, along with Greg Skordas, criminal defense attorney. And we have two people, the two founders of the Cold Case Foundation, Greg Cooper and I want to say Dean Jackson. Their names, that's what I was looking for right now. They will be on the show on Monday night. So we have a jam-packed, the hits keep coming. As I read a couple more comments here. Polka Dots. I really like Queen Elizabeth. Love The Crown. Julie Frew says, haha, no in the UK. No one in the UK likes Charles. I cried buckets when we lost Elizabeth II. Prince Charles is actually very thoughtful. Tiff Knox, Gooberhead Charles, nailed it, Phil. So a lot of people, look, I get it. If you love the Royals, I get it. I'm not watching The Crown with my wife. Maybe I will. I don't know. I'm into history now. I'm becoming soft in my old age, but I'm just not into it. I don't know. Anyway, I want to thank these guys for their service. Phil is putting in hard work, napping. Phil, tell me just very quickly.
I'm working as hard here. I can operate in fact, I have some really great operatives that do my legwork for me back in Texas. So I'm still working here. I'm running operations, surveillance operations, and working cases from here.
like what? Tell me a day though. Do you have to like go down the hill to get a gallon of milk? What do you do every day there? Do you go to the beach? What do you do for fun? Tell me a day?
Well, I work around the house. There's always something to do. I need to go out. I've got to refinish my Ohia posts out here that hold the house up. I've got my Skag out in the garage that I use. It's my second favorite vehicle to drive. And I go out here and I mow the acreage. We've got a little orchard here. We've got a little garden. My wife has a garden over here. We just, I tell you, it's just, and then we go to, every Friday night, we go to Kingsview Cafe, which is in Kapa'au where we are, which is King Kamehameha's home, or where he was born, rather, I'm sorry. And they have the best pizza in the world. So every Friday night, we have Kingsview Cafe pizza.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And
then we go to Kona, since we're on the further part of we're on the North Peninsula here of the Big Island. So we have to go every Tuesday. We have to make our Costco Walmart run in Kona, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away, and get all of our supplies and come up here. And we do that every week. And then we may on occasion go down to Pololu, which is, there's a lookout down there, or we may go over to YPO, lookouts over there. So we've been coming here for 30 years, and we still have not done everything that can be done on the Big Island. And of the 14 climates in the world, 11 of them are here on the Big Island. So it's a very interesting place. Yeah.
I know you're not going to believe this. I'm not the most handy guy in the world, but you know what? I wouldn't be the guy to, be refixing the posts of my house. I don't think. However, you'll be very happy to know it took me about 9 hours to figure it out because the instructions were actually in Chinese. But I put together the desk for my studio. So every time you see the desk in my new studio, even my kids couldn't believe that I was building it. I was sweating. I was hunched over. I had an Allen wrench, and I wish I brought the directions. The directions were in Mandarin, with very blurry photos from Amazon. So everyone, when you see the desk at the new studio, know that I put it together, and it is as sturdy as a rock. However, the chairs are a little complicated, so I've already asked the chief technical officer to get on that for me. So I know that would be a shock to you, Phil. Everyone, it's Friday night. Phil is going to go have pizza tonight. I now feel better knowing what his life is like. Scott, what are you doing tonight? Watching Dateline.
Yeah, I'll probably watch Dateline. I will see.
Right.
But it is pizza night too. I'll get a pizza.
Nice. How does a thin guy like you?
The power of suggestion. You know who we're missing, and she wasn't here last week either, is Abby Tasha, my adopted.
Yeah, I wonder where Abby is. That's a great point. Scott Duffey, my last question to you. How do you stay so thin and lean, especially if you reveal that you're eating pizza on Friday nights? Is it are you genetically, do you have a very fast metabolism, or do you just have water during the day?
No, I really don't drink a lot of water. I should. A lot of people complain. A lot of coffee. And
do you nibble on lettuce, or do you eat food?
Yeah, no, I'll eat a whole pizza. I'll eat a
He's one of those people.
Pizza.
He's one of those people.
Yeah.
No pineapple though on the pizza. Just
no. Yeah. No.
But he can eat. So with that, love you, America. Love you, Delaware. What island are you on, Phil? So I can properly bid you adieu. Love Hawaii, but which island?
What am I on?
Yeah.
What
the island? Yes.
I am on the island of Hawaii, which is otherwise known as the Big Island.
Love you, Hawaii, the Big Island. Until next time, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.